Afternoon, everyone. Welcome along to this session, and I hope you enjoyed the hold music that was playing just before we started. My name is Jason Foster. I'm the founder and chief executive at Cynozure. We're a data and AI consultancy, and we were born out of the fact that organizations really struggle to get value, get impact from the investments that they make in data and AI, and we don't think that's the right thing. When we look around the show floor here and all the other topics that we have going on, there's lots of great content about technology, about capabilities that we need to build, about how pipelines work, and not enough, frankly, about how do we actually use all of that to drive real value, real impact in organizations. So I'm really pleased to be here talking about that with you guys. And I have my partner in crime, Helen Louwrens, with me to have a conversation about how do we think about value, how do we think about return, why is it hard to do that, and what do we do about it, how do we measure the return of all this stuff that we should be doing and do when it comes to data and AI. So Helen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, hi everyone. As Jason said, I'm Helen Louwrens, and I'm the Director of Data Analytics at Mars in the veterinary health part of the business, and been around data analytics for the last 25 years. Started out at dunnhumby as an analyst, really using data to drive value with our clients. And the last two roles I've been very much client side, implementing change, showing the value, getting more investment, trying to prove that actually, and use data to do different things in the business to drive value for whatever value means in the business. And right now I'm in a commercial organisation, but prior to that I was at the Care Quality Commission, which is a very different type of organisation, healthcare regulator. Value means very different things in that type of business. So maybe we'll have a few examples from that.
Great. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation. We'll have some questions at the end. So anything you want to talk, just keep hold of, and they'll walk around with the mic towards the end. I'll flag that when we get to it. So as I say, lots of cash investment, millions, sometimes billions actually, in some larger organisations have been ploughed into data and AI, and that keeps going up every year. But we also read and see, and there's all these stats about. I'm pretty sure a lot of them are made up actually, but 95% of investments don't return. All these sorts of things. The truth is, whatever the stat is, that there is a lot of investment that goes in, and it's not always clear what the return is, what the value is, what the impact is. And the impact of that is people losing their jobs, data teams not delivering as much value as they can, organizations not seeing the potential that really comes from all of the promise. From your experience, why is that? What's sort of happening that's meaning that there's this gap between investment and what we hope to happen and then the reality?
Yeah. So I think there's several things going on here. I think possibly we are delivering value, but not telling a good story about the fact that we have. I think we may be doing really great things, but because the things that we're doing aren't things that the business values, it's not having the impact. And maybe we've got the opposite, where actually some people are surviving longer than they should, but they're not actually driving value. But right, change is hard, right? So if you've got a really big data transformation and you're spending a huge amount of money, those things take a long time. And I think often commercial organizations, if they're not seeing value quickly, they can lose patience with that. So what I think we need to be doing is to really start with something that can drive tangible and quick value early. You've got to earn the right, really, to get the big dollars, to spend the big money, and to buy you the time to do the big changes that you need to do. So I think it's really important that we focus on things that are really of value to the business, things that you can do in a self-contained way, drive some initiatives that can go end to end really quickly, show value. Example like in Tesco years ago, where we were helping them drive the .com activity and the growth of the .com as a platform. But have you forgotten a little widget that comes up on your app? That's a standalone thing that we can develop to use AI and smart data to basically push a new opportunity in front of a customer and grow a basket. You can measure that really quickly. It's a really self-contained thing. Flip that to the big, organizations who've got huge legacy systems that need replacing, that are going to cost a huge amount of money to replace end to end. The business isn't going to necessarily see the value from those things very quickly. So if you want to play in that space, I think you have to marry the big, long, heavy work, the heavy lifting work, with the quick, nimble returns that you can see.
I think you paint a really interesting picture there of things that we know we're trying to fix. So in the Tesco case, maybe it's improved, basket size, or better loyalty and retention, these sorts of things, where there's like a really specific business need, and data, AI, technology, whatever, can play a part in helping to drive that to a conclusion, and we can measure it. We know if we get more customers back onto the shop and they spend more money, there's an incremental uplift. We can measure that. People can buy into that. Great. And the more of those, the better, frankly. But then there's this thing where it's, well, we need to build infrastructure, a bucket of stuff, where it's kind of like we need to invest in some stuff in order to be able to do the thing, which is like improve the basket or the checkout journey in a website. And that infrastructure piece, and I mean that in the broader sense, not just technology, but the kind of foundations almost, are things that if you haven't got those in place, there's a real big cost in putting them in place, and something has to bear the brunt of the cost in terms of the business case for it to stack up. And often it can't. And often there isn't a big enough upside in a single thing. And if we can get customers back to the website to buy more, that might not pay for the Snowflake implementation and the Power BI and the this, that, and the other. So how do we invest those big bucks in things where we don't yet have the opportunity to align ourselves behind a kind of use case?
Yeah, I think that's the challenge, right? And for me, and maybe a theme that will come through all of this, is around partnering. So as a data leader, you can't do this all on your own. And actually the upside isn't going to be felt by you within the data team for the benefit of all those foundational pieces that you're going to put in place. So this is really where it's your job to be out there in the business, getting advocacy, and all those little quick things that you do get great returns for, those smaller pieces. It's not just you shouting about the value of those, it's the partners that you've got across the business. It's your commercial lead, it's your financial lead, it's your marketing lead, and getting them to really be selling the story with you about the fact that, to do more of these types of things, we are going to have to invest. But, I think somehow you've got to carve out the cost of that over the long term, right? So you can't attribute the cost of that big implementation that you need to do to the few things that you are getting benefit from it early on. I think somehow you have to partner with your finance team around how you're actually going to spread the cost of this over the longer term, and get them really bought into that. That's that partnership with finance is really important.
Well, there's also a piece there about how you categorize the spend. There's sort of capital expenditure, which is that sort of big infrastructure piece possibly, and then the ongoing run cost, the OPEX, and actually how finance departments see the spend and need to account for that spend and attribute that spend in the P&L does actually make a big impact about how you spend money, how you attribute the cost to certain people. And that all just creates a bit of complexity for people, in the trenches trying to deliver good work. And there's this kind of old-fashioned but still exists sort of upfront business case thing that always happens. Let's identify all the costs for something. And really, let's try and identify all the return. And I see a lot of business cases where really it's just the cost side that's covered. Here's how much we need to spend in order to do data. And actually, at the moment, where the brand is AI, in the boardroom, people are saying, if you want to do AI, because you've said to me you want to do AI, well, here's what we need to do in order to do it. And the thing that's missing is, well, what's the why? Where are we going to take it? What's it going to deliver us? What's the value it's going to deliver to us? And that missing gap, that missing bit often means the business case doesn't get approved. But at the same time, people are saying, can we invest harder in this thing to make it successful? So is your experience been that sort of upfront business case thing needs to be putting in place in order to get investment for a 1, 2 year, 3 year change program? Or is it much more sort of small, refined, incremental spend in order to deliver focused pieces of value?
So both, I think, as you say, sort of that's the traditional way of doing things. And the public sector, very much it's about like, what's the big chunk of money up front? How are you going to spend that? But I guess the value is different there, because it isn't about a financial upside. It's cost efficiency or better decisions, or, at the end of the day, we can improve policies or we can keep people safe. That's very different from we need to drive an additional 50 million revenue. So I think it's a slightly different case in that case, but more in the commercial space for sure. I think it's smaller incremental pieces rather than that big upfront, unless, I think digital, like more digitally native, newer businesses who are basically built on data. I think there's a very different mindset to this than in the more larger traditional organizations that are generally quite siloed, where data maybe isn't felt as intrinsically valuable. I think in those businesses where data is basically everything, I think those bigger cases are probably easier to get agreed, because there's no question about the value of the data. Whereas I think in organizations where data isn't as valued everywhere, the data team obviously knows and values the data, but not everywhere. I think it is harder to do those big one-off cases, and I think that's where the prove the value, build it over time is more important.
This is a little bit sometimes on the data team to prove that there's value in doing the data thing. And actually that's often after a team, an organization's invested 10, 20, 30, 50 people into this function, but still questioning whether it's delivering anything. It's sort of a bit of a strange, it's a contradiction that we will invest in maybe a chief data officer and the whole function, but then also still question the value that it's delivering. Well, we obviously saw enough value to put this thing in place and implement some technology and try and deliver something. So, but almost back to this question about, why is there this gap in value and ROI being felt? Do we think it's more, and you sort of touched on this, that we're not capturing and articulating it, and there is some value being felt, but we can't really put our fingers on what is it and how do we attribute it?
Yeah, and some of it is really intangible. If you shave 15 minutes off everyone in the operational team's day because their systems are slightly better and their data that they see in front of them slightly better, you can't suddenly bank, 10 people's worth of operational resource saving. Yeah. So that's really where, again, you've got to do more with your partners to really understand what they're doing with the data and the products that you're developing and building. And it's them that you need shouting in the boardroom to say, actually, no, don't disinvest from this type of team, because actually we're getting value from X, Y, and Z. And if you took that away, we wouldn't be able to do the things that we're doing, even though they're not, big sentinel sort of initiatives. They are every day helping the things that we do within the business.
Yeah, those champions out in the organization who are saying that they're clear and understand how data, analytics, insight, AI can play a part in the work that they're doing, how it drives. And I think you mentioned this in sort of digital native companies where it's very sort of product mindset, product driven. It's just innate, that is like in the DNA that people get, that's the kind of, they're a set of capabilities and tools they need in order to do the job.
Yeah.
But often that sort of isn't the case.
Yeah, and I've taken over data analytic teams where they take tickets, right? So someone puts in a request, I'll do the ticket and I'll pass the thing on. And there's never really the right interaction with the business to say, actually, am I doing the right thing? Is this actually what you need, not what you've just put in the ticket? And what have you actually done with the thing that I've presented back to you or pushed back to you through through pipelines? What are you doing differently with it? And then, 3 months later, are you still using that thing, or is it sitting on the shelf somewhere? So part of this is about, are you really clear the things that you're working on drive value for the business? Are you capturing all the value, regardless of how intangible, how much you can put a really hard cash number on that, or it's just, we feel good about this. Let's capture that and play that back to your sponsors, right? Let's make sure every quarter you're really playing back the sorts of things that people are saying, the feedback that you're getting, so that, some of that stuff's really intangible, as I said, but actually their jobs would be really much harder without it. I think it's for us in the data analytics teams to make sure that we're really having those conversations and capturing that value, because no one else is going to do that. And frankly, if that's the thing that helps us to maintain the investment that we've got, then it's absolutely on us to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a data function usually who cares about the investment that's being made, not for any kind of land grabby or personal gain, but to ensure that there's some good things that happen. And so no one's trying to do anything for the sake of it. Everyone's trying to do something for good purpose. But whose job is owning? Who owns the ROI? I suppose is the question. Is it on, as you say, the data function to sort of make sure it sort of scrabbles around, captures how people are doing, using these things, what value people are getting, or is it actually on, your marketing team, your policy team in your previous organization, the operations function, whoever it is, to own the delivery of the improvement of the metric, or is it some kind of combination?
So I think that's back to that partner point. I think it's a combination. So I think if you've got a really clear efficiency to be driven within your data team from, putting in a different stack or automating some pipelines, I think that's not really visible in the organization. That's for you. That's an efficiency that you can generate. I think that's a cost saving that you can claim and that you should be tracking.
But in that instance, you're the owner of the ROI.
Because you're the owner of you're benefiting as a team from that.
Yeah.
I think if it's about some new algorithms to drive marketing acquisition or retention, marketing are making the decision to use the thing that you've produced in order to deliver their service to the business. I think the ownership for the benefit sits with them. And of course, we can help them measure that. As a data team, we have a lot of the data, but I think the benefit sits with them, and they're the ones that need to claim that and they need to recognize. And so I think there's a handshake up front about, right, here's what we're going to measure. You own that. You can claim that benefit. And then that needs to be recognized. Once you've realized that needs to be measured, valued, acknowledged, etc. by that team.
Yeah, there's a kind of careful balance, isn't there? Because you don't want it to be a bit land grabby about who delivered the value, because there's a collaboration that happened and a set of activities that happened that led to the value or not. But equally, if you leave it to fate, then it's really difficult then to justify retrospectively, that thing we did with marketing or that policy change we made because we had some really good data. We helped with that. Please attribute some stuff to us. Don't question whether we add any value as a data function.
I mean, some of that's about business maturity, right, and culture, and I think,
and org design in some ways, and how you're set up as a business from an operating model perspective.
Yeah, and I think if you've got marketing teams that are going to try and claim everything, and the data teams are just sort of doing their own thing over here, like for us as data leaders, that's not a fun environment to be in, right? So we need to try and change that if that's the environment we operate in.
Yeah. I guess there's a question about how we change that, because that wanders away from ROI actually, and that's much more about the value of a data function, and also that depends on how you're set up. So if you've got not everyone has a central data function, and much of that happens in the trenches as such. But it comes to like how is the data thing and the data team perceived, and that's either through the lack of any value being delivered, or value has been delivered, it's not been recognized or attributed in the right way. So it almost comes to the perception and how the role is seen within the organization.
Yeah.
Have you had challenges with that?
Well, there's a live challenge which you and I have talked about, which I won't go into here. So personally, less so, but I think I've many acquaintances and colleagues in other organisations where you're brought in as a data person to lead this charge, and the rest of the business doesn't really know what you're there to do, and they don't really understand it because it's not something that they've sort of seen before, and they're not necessarily ready for the sorts of changes that you want to bring. It's like pushing uphill, and it's super hard for you as a data leader to kind of demonstrate why you're there and the value that your team can really add. So so I've not been in that place because I've been very selective about the roles I've picked. But I think, and that can also happen.
I'm very good at delivering, obviously.
Thank you very much. But I think, and I think actually potentially, when you're in an organisation and you've sort of grown through that organisation, and you're not someone who's come in, landed in with a big salary from the outside, but you're sort of a team that's evolved and iterated internally. I think that probably is the place you could find yourself.
Because it's all about trust, really. Well, it's a bit about trust. It's a bit about which you have to earn, and the way you earn trust is by showing and demonstrating that you can deliver value back to this point. And often that comes from not the big transformation or change, the infrastructure, the foundational pieces of work, like putting in a data management program or building a new platform. It's about showing and articulating, being really clear line of sight between businesses trying to achieve this and this data stuff helped. And being able to link those two things together. That's the way that, as a data function, I've seen, both when I was in industry and with clients now, that is it's the main way that you get at least a kind of in the door for the conversation, and then it helps you prove the credibility. And that can be something quite small. It doesn't need to be a major shift in a metric, but demonstrating the sort of direct or indirect impact is important.
Yeah, and I think this is where your relationship with your strategy team is really important, right? If you know where the business is overall what are the big strategic ambitions, and then how are you working with the functions delivering against those, and making sure that when you're prioritizing the work of your team, it's lined up with the strategy and then the business priorities. It's not I'm doing this thing because it's interesting. And sometimes you can see that in particularly amongst analyst teams, where you've got a few clever people and a bit of data. Wouldn't this be brilliant? Yeah, of course, that would be brilliant. But the business either isn't ready for that, or actually that's not going to deliver anything that's in line with the business plan for next year. So all well and good, but back to that point of value, it's great stuff, but it's not what the business needs at this point in time. And it might be that's, why isn't that working right now? Let's assess why that thing you think is valuable but isn't going to have an impact. Okay, well, these other things that would need to be in place around the way the organisation is structured, or the processes that exist in a different part of the business are just not there to catch the thing that you've built. So then that's the conversation you have with that team about, if you did this, we could help you in this way.
There's obviously the big part of ROI and closing the gap is about measurement and being really clear on what return we're trying to go after, whether that's a major business case or a specific use case, those two things we talked about. So measurement, and upfront knowing what you plan to get, and then tracking and measuring it along the way. And you touch on it there. The aside from building trust by proving value, the way that's only important and only relevant if it links to something that's important to the people that you're working with. So what does the CEO care about? What does the marketing director care about? What does the operations people care about? What are their strategic objectives or operational problems, which are also as important, which you hope link to some kind of strategic objective, but they often just cause day-to-day pain. So when we talk about ROI gap, we want to just understand what all of those things are and work on those. Like that's the most important thing, because it gives us a much better opportunity to say, well, you're working and trying to improve throughput of the warehouse, or more efficient logistics operation. Let's fix those things. And when you say that out loud, it's so obvious, but often what happens is we do tech implementation and we roll out data literacy programs, or we bring in a whole lot of new people, and they're disconnected. Those two things are disconnected, which creates this gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's then about how are you setting your data team up and analytics teams up for success, right? So are you prioritizing all your own work? Are you partnering with the business to prioritize the things that you're focused on? How are you interacting with the overall business planning process and the processes that govern the progress against those business plans? Like, if you're not in those conversations, then you're not in the right place in the organization.
Yeah, you need a seat in the conversation, and actually driving the conversation in the more mature organizations. Data leadership and data functions are contributing to the setting of strategy, not just the measuring of whether it happens. They have insight and can provide insight into what should we do, where should we go, what options do we have, what works, what doesn't, what do customers want and need. And if you be part of that conversation, then it's a more strategic function, and therefore ROI is almost some way fixes itself.
Yeah, like just some little examples of things in the past where we get, as a data team, we've been brought in to try and help a part of the business measure one of the initiatives that they were doing. And, there's two scenarios, right? You get brought in at the beginning, you help them set that initiative up in the way that you can capture the data that enables you to measure the outcome that you need to at the end. Or they come right at the end, towards the end of that, and go, right, we're finishing this project next week. We need to measure it. And it's like, okay, well, we can just about do this. And they're like, you're the one that's seen as incompetent because you can't measure the thing for them. But in fact, they've not set you up at the beginning to be part of the shaping of that. So that's back to like, how do you earn enough trust to be in the right place at the right time, so that you're able to influence those type of initiatives to be able to support them to measure what they need to as well.
Yeah, there's we've touched on this a couple of times, but there's very measurable things. We've talked about, they can be hard to measure. So the stuff that we definitely can measure, we're trying to improve something on the website, we make a change, we can see data played a part in that. We can go, there was an uplift, £10 million in the till, thank you very much. Then there's the infrastructure stuff, a bit harder, but we need to kind of categorize that in a certain way. We need to recognize that cost in a certain way, and we probably need to identify and articulate what opportunity it allows, even if it's not business case focused. But there's then a bunch of invisible stuff that, better decision making. It's quite hard to put a measure on that, and that's a little bit retrospective. Risks avoided. So some of these things are quite hard to they're not like something you can write down and put in a business case necessarily, or certainly a financial business case, but are still important.
Yeah.
Do you see, how do we deal with that? How have you dealt with that?
Right, well, I don't think you can bury your head in the sand with those things, right?
Yeah.
And actually, often that's I'm going to say fluff, the little sprinkling of magic that goes alongside this stuff, right? Is how does that feel to the teams that you're working with? Like, do I feel like we're able to do our function better as a result of having these things? Yes. Can I put a finger, can I put a specific measure on exactly how many better decisions I've made as a result of having this thing? Absolutely not. But this is back to if I took it, I'm going to take it away. It was almost like, if I don't have it anymore, what's the impact of that on the team? So what would you do if I took this away from you? I'd throw my toys out the pram. Okay, great. So you need to go and tell the CEO that although, you know, we have driven this bit of revenue and we've managed to save this bit of cost, it's maybe not substantial, but actually the benefit of all of these things together that you've delivered for me has allowed me to do better decisions, cost avoidance, actually drive a bit of maybe things that we hadn't anticipated. There's a halo effect around some of these things, right? So although you might not have captured the fact, and we were talking earlier about Crossrail, right, and the Elizabeth line and the benefits to some new businesses that might have started that you might not have anticipated as a result of that's not directly part of your business case. There are other things out there to look at.
Yeah. That metaphor of the Elizabeth line that we were talking about, I think works here, which is that's a major infrastructure program that the UK decided to invest in. They, of course, didn't go, let's spend billions and not know what the value would be. They knew that there'd be value to local communities. They knew that it would be, you know, improving the local area. They knew that it would create new revenue streams because they could put new shops in some of the stations. So they would have worked out, well, what's the value to the UK economy? More people can get into London and to the across town. We can have new office blocks built. All those things create value for the country. So the investment's worth being made. Now, politics aside, you can decide whether it was or not, and it is the best line in the country.
When it works.
And it works all the time.
No, when it works.
No, Elizabeth line always works. Anyway, but that is an infrastructure piece, and if you think if there's a metaphor to building a data platform, we can't just invest in building a data platform. We have to know what those opportunities and those upsides are. But yes, all the halo value that then comes from that, the fact that new businesses can spin up, that wasn't in the Crossrail's business case, but it is great new things that happened because of it. Great. We just wanted to open to the floor. I think we've got sort of 5 minutes, but probably time for one or two questions. I think there's a mic. Perfect timing. 5 minutes left. So there's a mic coming. There's a lady at the front here, please. It's on its way down. Get your steps in.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the discussion. It was really interesting. Now, my question really focuses on the beginning. So you engage with an organization. They have some kind of commitment to, consider artificial intelligence in their future innovation activities. How do you engage with them to drive this ROI topic in the sense of identifying the so-called low-hanging fruits, right? Because you have this big organization, there are a lot of different agendas, interests. At the end of the day, how do you manage to get to the point that you say, these are the 5 projects that I want to address. I know AI can do it. I'm sure I can deliver. I'm also sure I will get some kind of benefit because I already understand where we're heading. And maybe I can also use it as a platform for future communication in the organization to then expand to other areas. So how do you manage this part of the process, right, to get to that point?
Yeah. So we touched a little bit, didn't we, on what are the pain points in the organization? And that's the thing that's going to, if you can tackle the pain points in those first initial use cases, I think that's already you're going to get a lot of goodwill from the teams that are feeling a lot of that pain. So which are the ones that can tackle pain points, but also can be contained? So, some of the use cases might need data from every single domain across the organization therefore you need a lot of investment in bringing all of that together up front. Whereas if you've got use cases that are quite, vertically contained in terms of the data that you need to deliver them, and they solve some really pain points in the organization and they're aligned with the business strategy, then I think those are probably the ones you want to go after.
Yeah, I just build on that and say we don't want to start with AI and go, what can we do with it? We should start with what are the things I talked about, the strategic objectives or operational challenges, put AI on those, or not. It might be something else. It might be a dashboard or an Excel spreadsheet that fixes the problem. It doesn't need to be AI. There's also the innovation play of, cool, let's do some R&D on where could AI fit. It's a slightly different problem statement though to actually changing the business with AI. You've got to earn some trust that we can do something, and as I said, align it back to those objectives is certainly the best way. The other side is also start small, iterate and grow. So we've got to do something small or build the path to production, but start and test. So this example that Helen gave on improving the website, let's do that on a small cohort of customers, not roll it out to everybody first. If it works on a small cohort of customers or a small set of products, then let's grow that and build that out. So test, learn and iterate is a real important way to sort of start, not just build credibility, but also spend the money on the things that work. because we don't want to spend money, millions of pounds on something and then find out it doesn't work. Let's sort of do the things that drive genuine value. I think maybe we've got time for one more. Beat you to it.
Thank you. Thank you for the chat. My name is Doreen, and I'm going to go the devil's advocate and say what goes wrong. So when the return on investment is not as expected or perhaps lower, is it the team, the data analytics team that takes the brunt of it, or perhaps even the AI application that was used? Are you starting to see case studies in ultimately what goes wrong?
Well, I think when you don't get the benefits you expect, I do think you need to do some analysis to really understand and assess why that is, because you could still have built the best product, but it's not being adopted for whatever reason. So it might be that you haven't used the right data. It might be that you haven't built the right product. It might be that the team that you're building it for hasn't adopted it in the way that they need to. So I think you really need to assess what has happened there. And then maybe you've overestimated at the outset what that was going to deliver, or overestimated the ability for the team to adopt it. So lots of things can go wrong with this, and that's you've got to keep your eye on that all the way through, right? So that shouldn't be a surprise that it's going to go wrong when you get to the end. I think you kind of be aware of that as you go.
And frankly, what normally happens is the data leader gets moved on. That is what happens. Possibly a different, it's possibly a different question. So I don't know if anyone didn't hear. So this was, have we seen anything sort of broader than that with AI making a sort of a wrong choice or wrong decision, that kind of thing? Yeah. I haven't personally seen that yet. I think that's coming. Yeah, for sure.
I think you've got a plan for the eventuality that you might get that, and then work backwards to mitigate that through whatever project that you're putting in place.
There's a whole separate conversation about AI governance. One of my colleagues, my CTO, did a session yesterday on some standards about AI governance, which helps to try and contain and control those things. But certainly some unintended consequences coming. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you to Helen for joining me on stage. Appreciate all of your time. I hope you found that useful.